The air was thick that day, heavy with the promise of rain and something darker, something I couldn't name but felt in every nerve. I was in the kitchen, my fingers trembling as I smoothed the hem of my sundress, pale blue, the one Javier had once said made my eyes look like the sky. Javier, the delivery man, with his dark eyes that held secrets and a smile that made my heart race in ways it hadn't in years. He texted me that morning, a message on the burner app I downloaded to keep our secret safe, saying he'd be by at 2 p.m. with a package of paintbrushes I'd ordered as an excuse. I knew what I was doing, even if I wouldn't admit it to myself. I'd brushed my hair until it fell in soft waves, dabbed on a touch of perfume, and stood by the window, watching for the white van that had become my lifeline to feeling something, anything. When the doorbell rang, my pulse spiked. A mix of anticipation and guilt that had become as familiar as my own reflection. I opened the door, and there he was, Javier, his t-shirt clinging to his shoulders from the summer heat, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. "Hey, Elise," he said, his voice low, teasing, like he knew exactly why I'd ordered those brushes. He stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him, and the house felt smaller, the air charged with a current neither of us could ignore. I handed him the package scanner, our fingers brushing, and that was all it took. He set the scanner on the hall table, his movements deliberate, and pulled me to him, his hands firm on my hips, my back pressing against the cool plaster of the hallway wall. His lips found mine, hungry and unapologetic, and I melted into him, my hands sliding up his chest, tangling in the damp fabric of his shirt. The world narrowed to the heat of his skin, the scrape of his stubble, the way his breath hitched when I pressed closer. The sundress bunched under his fingers as he lifted the hem, his touch igniting sparks that drowned out the voice in my head screaming that this was wrong, that I was married, that I loved Mark. For those stolen moments, none of that mattered. It was just us, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of a lawnmower outside, the frantic rhythm of our breaths. I felt alive, desired, like I was more than the woman who waited alone in a quiet house, invisible to the man I'd vowed to cherish. I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear Mark's keys jangle or his footsteps or the soft gasp that escaped him as he stood frozen in the entryway. But I heard his voice, sharp and raw, cutting through the haze like a blade. "Elise, what the hell are you doing?" The words were a gunshot, shattering the spell. I froze, Javier's hands still on me, my lips tingling from his kiss, my dress askew. I turned, and there was Mark, his briefcase slipping from his hand, his face a canvas of shock, pain, and betrayal. His eyes, those kind, hazel eyes I'd fallen in love with, were wide, glistening, as if he couldn't believe the scene before him. Javier pulled away, muttering a curse in Spanish, grabbing his scanner and bolting past Mark, the door slamming in his wake. I stood there, exposed, my heart hammering, guilt flooding me like a tidal wave. Mark's gaze pinned me in place, and I saw everything in it, the love we'd built, the trust I'd broken, the future I'd just set ablaze. "Mark, I started, but my voice cracked, useless against the weight of what he'd seen. How do you explain away a moment like that? How do you erase the image of your wife in another man's arms, in the home you shared, the life you thought was yours? This is my story, raw and unfiltered, of how I let loneliness lead me to ruin, and how I'm fighting to pick up the pieces of a marriage I nearly destroyed. My name is Elise Harper, I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to my husband, Mark, who's 37, for 7 years. We live in a quiet suburb just outside of Portland, Oregon, in a house we bought with dreams of a life together that now feels like a distant memory. For the past 2 years, a deep, aching loneliness has seeped into my days, growing with every late night Mark spent at his downtown office. Every weekend he was too drained to connect. Every moment I felt like I was fading into the background of our own home. That loneliness, That desperate need to feel seen, to feel alive, is what led me to the delivery man, to a betrayal that tore apart the life we'd built, and to the moment Mark walked in and saw me in a way that shattered us both. Our story started like something out of a Pacific Northwest rom-com. I was 25, a freelance graphic designer with a tiny apartment in Southeast Portland, sketching logos in coffee shops and dreaming of making art that mattered. Mark was a financial analyst working for a firm in the Pearl District, all ambition and charm with hazel eyes that crinkled when he laughed. We met at a friend's bonfire on Sauvie Island, the kind where everyone's sipping local craft beer and the air smells of pine and campfire smoke. He made me laugh with some cheesy joke about the rain, and by the end of the night, we were sharing a blanket, talking about our favorite hiking trails and the places we wanted to see. We fell in love fast, dates at food carts on Hawthorne, rainy walks along the Willamette River, stolen kisses in the back of Powell's books. 2 years later, we got married in a small ceremony at a vineyard in the Willamette Valley, surrounded by rolling hills and the people we loved most. I thought we were unbreakable, that our love could weather anything, but life in the suburbs, in our cozy two-story with its cedar siding and backyard big enough for our golden retriever, Max, had a way of wearing us down. Mark's job at the firm grew more demanding, late nights crunching numbers for clients in Seattle, San Francisco, even New York. He'd come home exhausted, his tie loosened, his eyes heavy with stress, and collapse onto the couch with his phone or the Blazers game on TV. I'd try to talk about my day, about a new design project, about anything, but he'd nod absently or say, "Can we talk later, Elise?" I'm wiped. I didn't blame him, not at first. He was working hard for us, for the mortgage on our house, for the future we'd planned, maybe a kid someday, or a trip to the Oregon coast to stay in one of those quirky beach cottages. But the distance between us grew, and I started to feel like I was living with a stranger, not the man who used to leave love notes on my sketchpad. As a freelancer, I worked from home, which sounded idyllic but left me alone for hours, surrounded by the quiet hum of the fridge and Max's soft snores. I'd sit at my desk, tweaking logos for clients who sent vague feedback like, "Make it pop," and the silence would press in, heavy and unrelenting. I'd look at the photos on our walls, us at Multnomah Falls, laughing at a friend's wedding, kissing on a ferry to Bainbridge Island, and wonder where that Elise had gone. I missed feeling desired, feeling like someone saw me as more than the woman who kept the house running. I tried to fill the void, joining a book club in Lake Oswego, taking Max for long walks in Tryon Creek Park, calling my sister in Boise to talk about nothing. But the loneliness was a constant, a dull ache that no amount of coffee dates or Netflix binges could soothe. That's when the delivery started. I'd always been an online shopper, Etsy for art supplies, Amazon for books, local boutiques for clothes, but as my loneliness deepened, I found myself clicking buy now more often. A new set of watercolor brushes, a ceramic mug from a Portland potter, a pair of earrings I'd never wear. Each order was a spark, a tiny break in the monotony, of a reason to hear the doorbell and feel something other than the weight of my own thoughts. And then I met Javier. Javier was the delivery man for most of my packages, a guy in his late 20s with dark, expressive eyes and a smile that felt like it was just for me. He had a slight accent, Mexican, I later learned, and a way of carrying himself that was both relaxed and magnetic, like he belonged wherever he was. The first few times, it was just a quick exchange. I'd sign for the package on his scanner. He'd say, "Have a good one," and drive off in his white van. But I started to notice him. The way his t-shirt hugged his shoulders, the faint stubble on his jaw, the warmth in his voice when he said my name, Elise, like it was something special. I told myself it was harmless, a little crush to spice up my days. I was married, not blind. Then we started talking. One day, as he handed me a box of sketch pads, he joked, "You must be opening an art store with all these orders." I laughed, surprised by how good it felt, and said something about keeping busy. He lingered on the porch, leaning against the railing, and asked about my work. I told him I was a designer, showed him a quick sketch on my phone, and his eyes lit up with genuine interest. "That's amazing," he said, and I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in months. After that, every delivery came with a little more conversation about the Portland rain, his crazy routes through Beaverton and Hillsborough, the music he played in his van, mostly reggaeton and indie rock. I started ordering more, things I didn't need: a new journal, a set of candles, a scarf from a local shop, just to see him. I'd time my orders for mid-afternoon, when I knew he'd be on our street, and I'd make sure I was home, hair brushed, maybe a touch of lip gloss, telling myself it was just for me. I knew I was playing with fire. I loved Mark, I did, but Javier made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. He noticed things: how I'd painted my nails a new color, how my laugh changed when I was nervous, how I'd tied my hair up differently. Mark hadn't noticed those things in ages. I'd try to spark something with him, wearing the dress he used to love, cooking his favorite cedar plank salmon, but he'd be distracted, scrolling through emails or half asleep on the couch. I felt like I was screaming into a void, and Javier was the only one who heard me. The first time it went too far was a muggy afternoon in April, the kind of day where the air feels thick with possibility. I'd been wrestling with a client's feedback all morning, frustrated and restless, when the doorbell rang. Javier was there, holding a package of watercolor paints, his smile softer than usual. "Rough day?" he asked, and I don't know what possessed me, but I invited him in for a glass of water. I'd never done that before, and my heart pounded as he stepped into the kitchen, his presence filling the space. We stood by the counter, closer than necessary, and when I handed him the glass, my fingers brushed his, a spark that made my breath catch. His eyes locked on mine, and I saw something shift: desire, curiosity, maybe both. He set the glass down without drinking, stepped closer, and before I could think, his lips were on mine, urgent and warm, like he'd been waiting for this as long as I had. I pulled back, my chest heaving, and told him he should go. He nodded, his expression unreadable, and left with a quiet, "See you next time, Elise." I spent the rest of the day in a daze, guilt flooding me even as my body hummed with the memory of his kiss. I told myself it was a mistake, a one-time slip. I loved Mark. I wasn't that kind of person. But the next time Javier came, I didn't stop him. We kissed again, in the hallway, then the living room, his hands bolder, my resolve weaker. It escalated from there, quick, desperate moments on the couch, against the kitchen counter, in the shadow of the staircase. We never went to the bedroom. That felt like too much, like crossing a line I couldn't come back from. I told myself it wasn't an affair, just a physical release, a way to fill the emptiness. But I was lying. Javier was becoming a part of me, a secret I carried in every stolen glance, every touch. We were careful, or so I thought. Javier came during the day, when Mark was at his office downtown. We used burner apps to text, short messages about when he'd be by, what I'd ordered. I'd delete them right after, but I memorized every word, replaying them in my head like a song I couldn't stop humming. I'd order something small, a sketchbook, a set of pens, knowing it was just an excuse to see him. The packages piled up in the garage unopened, a testament to my growing obsession. Mark started to notice something was off. He'd ask why I was so jumpy, why I seemed distant when he came home. "Is everything okay, Elise?" he'd say, his brow furrowed. I'd lie, blame it on a tough client or a bad day, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the way he'd linger in the doorway, watching me. He started coming home earlier, trying to reconnect, suggesting hikes in Forest Park, cooking dinner together, even surprising me with a bouquet of dahlias from the farmer's market. It made my guilt sharper, because I could see him trying, see the man I'd fallen in love with reaching out. But I was too caught up in Javier, in the thrill of our secret, to meet him halfway. I got reckless. I stopped checking the time, stopped listening for Mark's car in the driveway. I thought we were safe, that our secret was untouchable. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and mine came apart on a gray, humid Thursday in June. Javier had texted that morning, saying he'd be by around 2 p.m. with a delivery, a set of paintbrushes I'd ordered on a whim. I was in the kitchen, wearing the blue sundress Javier liked, my hair loose, my pulse already racing. When the doorbell rang, I opened it, and he stepped inside, his eyes dark with intent. We didn't bother with small talk. He pulled me to him, his hands on my hips, my back against the hallway wall. His lips found mine, hungry and unapologetic, and I melted into him, my fingers tangling in his hair, the world narrowing to the heat of his skin, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower. The sundress bunched under his fingers as he lifted the hem, his touch igniting a fire I couldn't control. I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear Mark's keys, or his footsteps, or the soft gasp that escaped him as he stood in the entryway. But I heard his voice, raw and broken, cutting through the haze like a knife. "Elise, what the hell are you doing?" The words were a gunshot, shattering everything. I froze, Javier's hands still on me, my lips tingling from his kiss. I turned, and there was Mark, his briefcase slipping from his hand, his face a mask of shock and pain. His eyes, those eyes I'd fallen in love with, were wide, glistening, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Javier pulled away, muttering something in Spanish, grabbing his scanner and bolting past Mark, the door slamming behind him. I stood there, exposed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. My dress was askew, my breath ragged, and the truth was written all over me. "Mark, I started, but my voice cracked, useless against the weight of what he'd seen. How do you explain away a moment like that? How do you erase the image of your wife in another man's arms, in the home you built together?" "Don't," he said, his voice low, trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. He dropped his briefcase, the thud echoing in the silent house, and walked to the kitchen. I followed, my legs unsteady, my mind a blur of panic and shame. Max trailed behind, whining softly, sensing the tension. Mark poured a glass of water, his hands gripping the counter so hard his knuckles turned white. He didn't look at me, just stared at the sink, his jaw tight. "How long?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to lie, to say it was a one-time thing, but the truth spilled out, heavy and sharp. 5 months, I said, my throat tight. "Since April." He laughed, a bitter, choking sound that made my stomach twist. 5 months. With the delivery guy. In our house, Elise. He turned to face me, and the pain in his eyes was worse than any words. "Why? Was I that bad? Was this life?" He gestured at the kitchen. The photos on the fridge, Max curled up in the corner. Was it that awful? I wanted to tell him it wasn't about him, that it was my loneliness, my weakness, my need to feel something. But the words felt hollow, like excuses for a choice I'd made over and over. "I was lonely," I said, tears streaming down my face. "You were always gone, Mark." I felt invisible. I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear. "Lonely?" His voice rose, sharp with disbelief. "I was working for us, Elise. For this house, for our future. And you were, what? Screwing the guy who brings our Amazon packages." He shook his head, like he was trying to erase the image of us together. "I trusted you. I thought we were a team. I thought you loved me." "I do love you," I sobbed, my hands twisting together. "I never stopped loving you. It was a mistake, a stupid, awful mistake." "A mistake," he said, his voice breaking. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This is you choosing to throw us away over and over for 5 months." He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, pausing just long enough to look back at me. "I can't be here right now," he said, and then he was gone, the door slamming behind him, the sound echoing like a final note in a song I didn't want to end. I sank to the floor, my body shaking with sobs, Max nudging my arm with his wet nose. Confused and worried. The house felt too big, too empty, the silence mocking me with every choice I'd made. Mark didn't come home that night, or the next, or the one after that. He texted once, saying he was staying at a hotel in downtown Portland, that he needed space. Javier vanished too, his delivery stopped, his route reassigned, like he'd been erased from my life. I was alone, surrounded by the unopened packages in the garage, each one a reminder of my betrayal. I tried to keep going. I cleaned the house, scrubbing every surface like I could wash away what I'd done. I worked on projects, but my hands shook and my designs were lifeless. I called my sister, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, not yet. The shame was too heavy, a constant weight in my chest. I kept seeing Mark's face, the way his eyes had glistened with unshed tears, the way he looked at me like I was a stranger. I thought about driving to his hotel, begging him to come home, but what could I say? I'd broken his trust, shattered the foundation of our life together. 2 weeks later, Mark came back to get some clothes. He looked exhausted, his face shadowed with stubble, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Javier and I had crossed so many lines and talked. It wasn't angry this time, just raw, like peeling back skin to expose the wound. He told me he'd felt me slipping away for months, that he'd blamed himself for working too much, for not being enough. I thought you were just stressed, he said, his voice quiet. I didn't know you were, with someone else. I told him everything, the words spilling out like poison I needed to purge. I told him about the loneliness, how I'd felt invisible, how Javier had made me feel seen. I didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify it. I owned my betrayal, even as it tore me apart to say it out loud. I love you, I said, my voice breaking. I never stopped loving you. I lost myself. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, like he was looking through me. I love you too, Elise, he said. But I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can look at you without seeing him. I wanted to beg, to promise I'd fix it, but I knew it wasn't that simple. We agreed to try counseling, to see if we could rebuild something from the ruins. He moved back in, but he slept in the guest room, and the space between us felt wider than the Columbia River Gorge. We found a therapist in Northeast Portland, a woman with a calm voice who asked hard questions, and we started going once a week, sitting on her couch, unraveling the mess I'd made. It's been 5 months since that day, and we're still trying. Counseling is brutal. Every session feels like picking at a scab, exposing the hurt over and over. Some days, we find pieces of the old us, a shared laugh over Max stealing a sock, a quiet morning sipping Stumptown coffee on the porch, the rain tapping softly on the awning. Other days, I see the wariness in his eyes, the way he hesitates before saying, I love you, and it's like a knife in my chest. He's trying, I know he is, showing up to therapy, holding my hand sometimes, planning a hike to Silver Falls like we used to. But the trust is fragile, like a spider web stretched too thin, and I don't know if it'll hold. Javier is gone, a ghost of a mistake I'll carry forever. I deleted the burner app, stopped ordering things online. The doorbell doesn't ring with that same thrill anymore, and when I hear a delivery van on our street, my heart skips, not with longing, but with the weight of what I almost lost. I'm learning to live with the guilt, to face the woman in the mirror who made those choices. I've started painting again, not for clients but for myself, pouring the pain and regret into colors on a canvas. I don't know if Mark will ever forgive me, or if I'll ever forgive myself, but I'm fighting for it, for him, for the life we promised each other at that vineyard 7 years ago. Because even after everything, Mark is still the one I want to come home to, the one I want to rebuild with if he'll let me.